Kiddushin Daf and continues the Gemara's analysis of the Mishnah, which lists and discusses the kinyanim of an Eved. So we're on the 2 dots before lines into the Daf. We're discussing the kinyan mishtar. We had said that an Eved can be acquired through kesef or a shtar, but not chazaka. The Gemara says, what is the source of this halacha? That you can acquire an Eved by writing a shtar kinyan. So Ula says it is from a pasuk. Ula is our first source, where it says about an amma hevriya, a female eved, that is a shivcha, that if the adain is marrying her, that he has to treat her well, even if he marries someone else. So that links the amma hevriya to the someone else. Now the someone else is a regular Kiddushin, so you're linking the acquisition of an amma hevriya to the marriage of a regular isha. And therefore, just like a regular isha is acquired with a shtar, an amma hevriya can also be acquired with a shtar. So the Gemara says there is a machlekes in a kinyan of an Amma Ivriya who writes the shtar. That is, if she's obviously being sold by her father, because she has to be under age 12. So who writes the shtar? According to the opinion that the master, the Adin, writes the shtar, then it's very similar to the kinyan of an Isha, because the husband writes a shtar, Kiddushin. And that is Rav Huna's opinion, and therefore this makes sense. However, according to Rav Chisda, who disagrees and says the father writes the shtar, so it is not similar at all to the Kiddushin, where the shtar is written by the one who is making the acquisition. Here, the shtar is written by the one who is giving away the item, the woman. So what then is the limud? This limud can't work. So the Gemara therefore goes to a different limud. We'll cycle back around to this one. First, we're going to try a different limud. So Rav Yaakov says there is a pasuk describing an Amma Ivriya and comparing her to an Eved Kanani, and it says Lo Seitzi Ketzeis Avadim. She does not go out like an Eved Kanani goes out. That's referring to that if an Eved Kanani is injured, if he loses a limb, he goes free. That does not apply to an Amma Ivriya. Now, so the Gemara says, she doesn't go out like an Eved Kanani, but she does go in like an Eved Kanani, that she can be acquired like an Eved Kanani. Now, an Eved Kanani can be acquired with kesef, shtar, or chazaka. So, therefore, this is adding the kinyan of the Eved Kanani of shtar. So, to say, obviously, kesef we already know, so it's not adding that, so it's adding shtar. Someone says, how do you know it's adding shtar? Maybe it's adding chazaka. Someone says, no, chazaka is excluded by the pasuk of Visnachaltem oisam levnechem acharechem, that you force them, you can make them work, that is the Eved Kanani, you can force them to work for your children after you, so you force them, but you don't force someone else. That is, you don't, chazaka really works by forcing them to do one act of service. That's what chazaka is. So you can't do that with someone else. You can't do that with an Amma Ivriya. So the Gemara says, well, Visnachaltem oisam levnechem acharechem means them something. It doesn't say them what. Maybe it's saying that you can't have them do shtar. Someone says, no, shtar is already included from the Seitzi Ketzeis Avadim. Someone says, so you're including one thing, you're excluding one thing. How do you know if you should include shtar and exclude chazaka, or the opposite? So Gemara says, no, it's logical you should include shtar, because shtar you already find by a Bas Yisrael, that it takes a Bas Yisrael out of the reshus of her husband through shtar. So this would also take her out of reshus with a shtar, should take her out of the reshus of her father with a shtar. So Gemara says, no, maybe she's chazaka. Chazaka, we already see you can acquire things with chazaka. You can acquire property that's hefker, like for example, property of a ger who has no yarshim and becomes hefker. You can acquire that by just doing chazaka, by holding it. So you should also be able to acquire an al-mavri with chazaka. So Gemara says, no, I'd rather use the one which we already found can do things that are ishus related, that have to do with the woman. That's shtar, which we find by ishus. You don't find chazaka by ishus elsewhere. Now, the Gemara gives a second shot. The Gemara says that the pasuk which we said before of imacheres yikachla, that links an Amma Ivriya to a kinyan isha, that's what tells me that you should include shtar and not chazaka. All right, that concludes the limud. So now the Gemara says, now Rav Huna doesn't have a drasha from this pasuk of Seitzi Ketzeis Avadim. We had a drasha in Rav Chisda's opinion. We had a drasha for that. What is Rav Huna going to do with Seitzi Ketzeis Avadim? So the Gemara says he doesn't use it for a drasha. He says that it's used for its simple pshat. She does not go out like other Avadim go out, meaning she doesn't go out if she loses a limb. So the Gemara says, why does Rav Chisda say that there's a drasha? So where it says if it would just be meant to teach what it says directly, it should say Lo Seitzi Ka'avadim. What does Lo Seitzi Ketzeis Avadim? The extra word. That's teach me this drasha. All right, then whenever it refers back to the Mishnah, more kinyanim we saw in the Mishnah, and now we saw how the Eved is clean himself, meaning how he goes free. So first of all, it said he goes free if he reaches the end of his 6-year service. Umar says that the source for that is a pasuk explicitly says Sheish Shanim Yaved or Shvias Yetze, 6 years he works and 7th he goes free. He also goes free with the Yovel, like it says Ad Shnas Yovel Yaved Imach. And then we saw a Giro in Kesef, meaning that he could pay down the years that he owes left. Still, he can prorate how many years he has left based on the purchase price and pay that down. So the Gemara says, what's the source for that? Chizkiah says there's a pasuk that says v'hefta, that it can be redeemed. And we've seen before that that could have been written differently. V'hefta, therefore, is a drasha. Now, that's written by Nam Avriya. So now the Gemara says, we have a brisa that says that you could use for this either kesef, money, or shavi kesef, other valuables, and you could also use a shtar. So Gemara says, kesef, I understand, the Torah says, mikesef meganasa, you pay part of the purchase price. Shavi kesef, I understand, you could use even valuables, because it says yashav gula, so you should return his redemption money. Mikesef meganasa, that's it says yashav gula, mikesef meganasa, it adds other types of valuables. But shtar, what is the shtar? How does he redeem himself with a shtar? If it's a shtar chayvet, he's going to pay the money. So that's kesef. That's not something else. And what must it mean? A shtar shechur. That we've seen that an Kanani gets a shtar shechur, a document of emancipation, that the master writes for him and he goes free. So the Eved Ivri, why should the Eved Ivri require shtar shechur? Shtar shechur is to change his status from being an Eved. That only applies to someone whose body belongs to him. All he has is a monetary obligation. He was sold to the master, and therefore he has an obligation to work for him. It doesn't belong to him. He just works for him. So let him just say, I'm Michael. Let him say in front of two Eidim or in front of the Beis Din. Let the owner say, I'm Michael, your additional work. What's the point in writing it on a shtar? So Gemara says, so this tells me that it is Gufay Kane. He does belong to him. And he can't just be Michael Gufay Kane. That doesn't take that away. You have to actually be makne it with a shtar. Gemara now moves on to discuss the next thing, which is that an Amavriya has an additional way that she goes free over an Eved Ivri, and that is an Amavriya goes free when she brings signs of physical maturity. So the Gemara quotes Reish Lakish, who says that there's another way that an Amavriya goes free, and that's if her father was the one who sold her into Avdus in the first place. If he dies, then she goes free as well. Where do you see that? It's a Kavachemer. Simanim of physical maturity did not remove a girl from the shus of her father. Her Maisi Yadayim and her Metzias still belong to the father. Yet, we do see that the death of the father removes her from the shus of the father. That is, the father's inheritors don't have the right to those Metzias or Maisa Yadayim. So you see, the Misa, the death of the father, is stronger than Simanim. So if Simanim remove her from the shus of the Adain, so certainly the death of the father should remove her from the rishus of the other. So therefore, Reish Lakish says the death of the father also sets her free. So Gemara asks, if that's true, why is it not listed in the Mishnah? The Mishnah lists ways in which an Amavriya goes free that don't apply to an Ish. Why doesn't it list that? It only lists Simanim. So Gemara says, okay, so it listed one and it left one out. So Gemara says, there's a rule, you can't leave only one thing out. If you leave something out, it has to be an incomplete list. It has to be more than one thing that's left off the list. So what else is left off the list that this is left off the list as well? So what is left off the list is the death of the master. You don't inherit an Amavriya, so if the master dies, she goes free. So Gemara says that can't be it, because where the list is a list of things which apply to an Amavriya and not to an Eved Ivri, but that applies to an Eved Ivri as well. So therefore, that can't be on the list. So Gemara says, why is it not listed then? It's not listed because it doesn't have a set time. There is no fixed time in which the father will die. All the other things we know when to expect them and when they will happen. So we only listed things that are predictable. This is not predictable. Samara asks that Simonim are also not predictable. Simonim depend when they come, and they depend on the age. So why does it list Simonim if it's not listing things that have a set time? So Gemara answers, or Safra says, there's two types of simanim, upper simanim and lower simanim. The upper simanim have no set time. Whenever they arrive, they are valid simanim. You're right, they are not predictable. However, the lower simanim are fixed to a time because they consist of hair, and hair doesn't count unless it's in the right age. So the Gemara quotes a brisa. When a child is 9, up until age 9, any hair that grows is not a sign of adulthood, because we assume that it's a mole or some other type of skin abnormality, and therefore it doesn't count. From age 9 to age 13 for a boy or 12 for a girl, there is a machlokes if it's still there, that it's the same hairs are still there from before age 9, if they count or not. The Tanna Kama says it still doesn't count. It's still called a mole. And Rabbi Yehuda says no, that will count. Only from age 13 and on does that count. And everybody agrees that that is a siman. So you see, you do have to have a fixed time. It's only from age 13. So therefore, it's not considered to be something that's unpredictable. The Gemara asks another kasha on the halacha that we just said, that an Amavriya can leave with the death of the father. So Gemara asks that we have a brisa that lists how many ways an Amavriya and an Eved can go free. The brisa is listing which ones get a hanaka, which ones get a gift when they leave, and which ones do not. This is a machokas. If an Eved who flees or an Eved who pays down his remaining years if he gets a gift. So we have this brisa where we list that there are a total of 4 ways to leave that get a gift, 3 for an Eved and 3 for an Amavriya, overlap of 2, but there's one that applies to an Eved that doesn't apply by an Amavriya, and one applies by an Amavriya that doesn't apply by an Eved. So on the list you have the 3 that apply by an Eved are the end of 6 years, the arrival of the Yovel or the death of the master, and that is if he's a Nirtza, because otherwise he would not go free. And the 3 by an Isha are the end of 6 years, and Yovel just like by an Ish, and Simanim, because a woman doesn't have an Nirtza and a man doesn't have Simanim. So the Gemara says here, you can't tell me that we left one out, because it specifically lists 4. If you give a number, you can't tell me you left one out. Now, if you want to say that you only listed things that have a fixed, predictable time, you didn't list things that don't, so then I'll ask you from Simanim again. If you'll tell me the same answer, like Rav Safra said, that Simanim below have a predictable time, so then I'll ask you, but what about Mises Ada, and the death of the master is listed here? And the death of the master also doesn't have a predictable time. So the Gemara answers, death of the master is not one of the 4. All we said here was a list of 4. We didn't say which 4. Death of the master is not one of them, and it's not listed because it doesn't have a predictable time. What then are the 4? So Gemara says, Yovel is listed twice, because Yovel applies in 2 different ways. There's Yovel before 6 years and Yovel after 6 years. And those are therefore listed separately, and therefore the 3 for an Ish are Yovel, and completion of the 6 years. The 3 for an Amma Ivriya are 1 Yovel, because there's no extension of 6 years by an Amma Ivriya, completion of 6 years, and Simanim. So the says this has to be true, because if you say otherwise, if you want to say that both Yovels count as 1, and we're counting Misa as Ha'adain, so why didn't it say Misa Ha'adain by the Amma Ivriya? Amma Ivriya also goes free with Mrs. Adai. So it must be the way we're explaining it. The Gemara asks one more kasha, very similar from another similar brisa. This one, the Gemara let's continue. This one, there's no answer for. This kasha is brought by Rav Amram. The brisa says that the following receive a hanaka: one who leaves because of the completion of 6 years, Yovel, or the death of the master. And in addition, one for Amar Avriya is Simanim. It does not mention the death of the father. So obviously, death of the father doesn't apply. Now, if you want to say we left one out, but it says ve'elu, we can't say you left one out by elu. If you want to say we didn't list the things that are unpredictable, well, it clearly says you have simanim. If you want to say simanim don't count, so you have, because of Rav Safra, so you have the death of the master. It's specifically lists the death of the master. That's obviously unpredictable, and therefore you can't use it as an answer. So this is a good kasha on Rish Lakish, and therefore we have no answer for that. So Mara asks, but Rish Lakish had a kal v'chomer, and a kal v'chomer brought from the misa of the master, the misa of the father, which seems to be a stronger yitzia because it works from his own rishos, as opposed to simanim. My answers to that, no, simanim are still stronger, because simanim are an actual physical change. The death of the father is not a physical change, and therefore it is not a strong reason to depart and go free. The Gemara now brings a proof actually for Reish Lakish, even though we've rejected him. Now we have a indicator that seems to support him, that the Amariya should go free with the death of a father, and this comes from a contradiction between two brises as to who gets the anak, who gets the gift that is given to an Eved or to an amma when they depart the master's household. So one brisa says the gift, what we call the enek of an Eved Ivri and of the Amma Ivriya both go to themselves. It's a different brisa that says that the anak of the Amma Ivriya actually goes to her father. The brisa even adds and says that her found objects go to her father, but she does have to pay her master for the time that she spent finding the object that she wasn't working. Now, so the contradiction we have is who gets the anaka, who gets the anak of an Amma Ivriya. According to one brisa, it's the father. According to another one, it is herself. So how would we resolve this contradiction? It must be, one is talking about where she goes free based on Siman, and one is talking about where she goes free based on the death of the father. If she goes free based on the death of the father, there's no one to get the anak except for her, so she must get it herself. So that would be the simplest answer, but that would indicate that an Amma Ivriya does go free when her father dies. So the Gemara answers, no, there's a different answer. One is that there is a father, one is that there isn't a father. Not that she went free with the death of the father, but that there wasn't a father anyway from before. Okay, now the Gemara wants to know, what is the chiddush that the anak of an Eved Ivri is kept by him himself? That an Amma Ivriya keeps hers, there is a chiddush that it doesn't go to the inheritors of the father. You would think maybe the father inherits them, and then after the father dies, he should bequeath them to his inheritors. However, in Eved Ivri, of course he gets his own. Who else has a right to get his anak besides for him himself? So Rav Yosef says on that, there's a yud here that turned into an city. It's a very small thing that turned into a large thing, meaning that this Mishnah has written extra terms which apparently are not needed. Abai gives a different answer, calls for Sheshes, and he says this is Tutoi, who says there's a chiddush here that it doesn't go to the Eved's Bal Choiv. That if the Eved owes money to someone, you don't pay the anak directly to that person. Similar step we've seen on the last daf, that this was because of Shibud Rav Nasan, who says that if Reuven has money to Shimon and Shimon has money to Levi could collect directly from Reuven. So the Bal Chayiv that is owed by the Eved, and the Eved is owed the Hanak by the master, you would say maybe the Bal Chayiv should be able to collect it from the master. Kamashman, that he does not. The Gemara now returns to the halachas of Ha'naka, which we had mentioned briefly. The Torah tells us when an Eved goes free at the end of 6 years, you should give him a gift to part with, a Hanaka. So the Gemara has a brisa which has a number of opinions as to who gets a Hanaka, which type of leaving the Avdus deserves a Hanaka. So the brisa's first opinion, the Tana Kama, says that it applies to one who finishes his 6 years, which is where the Torah says it. Also applies to Yovel, and somebody who leaves because of the death of the master. And Amma Ivriya has an additional one when she brings Simanim. The Tanakama continues and says that there are two that don't receive it, and that is somebody who runs away and somebody who pays down his remaining years. Now, Reb Meir says somebody who runs away does not get it. Somebody who pays down his remaining years, he will get it. Reb Shimon, who we've seen quoted earlier, says there are 4 types of Hanaka, 3 by a man and 3 by a woman, and you can't say 4 by any of them, because Simanim don't apply to a man, and Ritzia, which is the only situation in which you have one who leaves by Yovel, that does not apply by a woman. Now, leaving by Yovel by a man within 6 years is not included here. Now, says the Gemara, what is the source of these types of Hanaka, and what is the source that the ones who don't get Hanaka do not get Hanaka? So Gemara again quotes another brisa that says, the Torah only says Hanaka by one who leaves after 6 years. You would think that's the only one. How do you know to extend it further to one who leaves at Yovel or the death of the master or an Amavir with Simanim? Because it says, Tishalchenu v'chis tishalchenu. Repetition of v'chis tishalchenu was to include more. How do you know not to include a runaway and someone who redeems himself? And it's because it says, Ki tishalchenu chavshi me'imach, when you send him away from you. You're being sent from you. These are leaving on their own. He ran away or he bought his way out. Now, Rameir says, one who runs away does not get Hanaka. I agree, because it's not called being sent from you. But somebody who leaves from you, someone who redeems himself, that is called leaving from you. He bought his way from you. What's the problem? So Maras, even the one who runs away still needs to pay down his remaining years. He might be free, but he still owes the money. So when he pays it, should be considered like he redeemed himself. Why should I have a different lacha when he redeemed himself? He should need to pay. So Maras says, we're talking about, you're right, but we're talking about a situation where he doesn't end up paying, and that's because he gets Yovel while he's a runaway. I mean, he runs away before his years are up, then Yovel arrives. So now he doesn't go back to work. Now he's free. But he does not get Hanaka.